We are growing puppy due to as a protest, so that the government may negotiate with us and settle our problem and honor our viewpoint.
Get another shot from this side.
With the onset of any business proposition, two factors must be taken into consideration: supply and demand. It is the ample availability of both that makes heroin a bestseller in Pakistan's narcotic market.
हीरोइन 1980-81 के अंदर हीरोइन मार्केट में आई और अड्डे वाले हमें फ्री देते थे सैंपल के तौर पे कि ये नया नशा है, उसे चेक करो कि किस किस्म का है.
Heroin is derived after many chemical processes from opium, a product of the poppy plant, which has for centuries been grown in a belt of land that runs across the north of Pakistan into neighboring Afghanistan. In the 80s, this stretch of land was referred to as the Golden Crescent and was the world's primary source of heroin after Myanmar. It was only in the 1980s that the world community stood up and took notice.
1980 में 1980 में हमारे मुल्क में चंद हजार नशे के आदी अफराद थे, हीरोइन के आदी अफराद, और उस वक्त मंशियात की अफीम की पैदावार 800 मेट्रिक टन सालाना थी. बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा खर्च किया गया मंशियात के खात्मे के लिए और उनकी कारकर्दगी बड़ी शानदार नज़र आती है कि 800 मेट्रिक टन से कम होकर सिफर हो गई. दूसरी तरफ जो नशे के आदी अफराद, बिलखुसूस हीरोइन के आदी अफराद जो चंद हज़ार थे, वो आज 2.5 मिलियन 25 लाख हो चुके हैं. यानी मंशियात की पैदावार, अफीम की पैदावार कम होने से उसके इस्तेमाल पर कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ा, बल्कि एक नुकसान ये हुआ कि आज हम हीरोइन में भी खुद कफील नहीं है. हमने हमारे जो मुल्क के हीरोइन पीने वाले अफराद हैं उनकी तलब को पूरा करने के लिए अफगानिस्तान से हीरोइन स्मगल करनी पड़ती है.
2.5 million users consuming a minimum of 1 uncut gram of heroin a day. This means that there are at least 2,500 kilograms of heroin changing hands on any given day in Pakistan. There is certainly no deficiency in supply, wherever it may come from. What is more complex is the issue of demand. Heroin is not simply the one-hit wonder it's made out to be.
Because the thing is that not everybody exposed to the same drug of abuse will get addicted. If both you and I were to, have a shot of heroin, one of us might become an addict and the other might not.
Then we come down to the factor of vulnerability. What are the dynamics that work behind? What is the psychology of a person? What makes a drug addict different from just a regular passerby?
Things that are easier to measure are things such as family influence, and that has been shown to play a role in addiction also.
Research shows that children of substance abusers are 4 times more at a risk of becoming substance dependent than any other average individual.
And it probably has to do with the levels of certain neurotransmitters in our brain and the way the circuits are interconnected that predisposes an individual. And so of 100 people who get exposed to alcohol, let's say 30 become alcoholic. Well, those 30 probably had a different kind of wiring in critical areas of the brain.
We need to keep in mind the fact that this drug abuse is never a problem that happens in isolation. It is a problem that happens with many other, it may happen with many other disorders alongside.
In other words, people with psychological problems or with a family history of drug abuse are more vulnerable to addiction. But what of social context? What is the target market for heroin?
The middle class is usually not exposed to a drug like heroin. Okay, it's usually the lower end of the socioeconomic strata or the higher end of it.
It's not easy to find evidence of heroin abuse in the upper class. The more apparent candidates for heroin abuse are those who deal on a daily basis with abject poverty.
Now we need to keep in mind the personality factors that we were talking about, which predispose us to getting psychological problems, which will eventually predispose us to getting into drug addiction. Right? The more poverty-stricken an area is, the more problems it will have. The people who are there will face those issues on a daily basis, and some of them will learn to cope with it, and some of them will find drugs as a coping mechanism for it. I'm not saying that they will get it, but they will be more prone. The vulnerability increases for them to get into such things.
One begins to notice a deadly and sinister force at work here. The cost for a line of cocaine in Karachi is roughly the same as a poor man's monthly income. It is obviously a drug for the elite. While heroin, a far more potent drug, costs only 30 rupees for an amount good enough for 3 intravenous shots. Heroin is definitely a false promise reserved for the poor. Addiction is indeed a well-planned business. While the cost of essential commodities may spiral beyond the reach of Pakistan's impoverished, heroin will always be sold at a bargain.